Hello, folks. Thanks for tuning in again to the Britt, Kanawha, West Hancock Athletics Podcast. Dan Kroll here for episode 63. And tonight I have Brian Benning. Brian coached and taught at West Hancock in the late 90s and early 2000s. He was one of my football coaches. I went to one of his wrestling practices just for fun one day and realized it wasn't much fun. But this guy knows everybody and everyone knows him, so I'm excited for this one. How you doing tonight, Coach?
Fantastic. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Bet, and I like your hat. I saw you wearing that. I remember people wearing that exact hat. That's great.
This is so old. It's the original one. It's I hate to say it, but it's probably only been washed about once every 5 years. And with a head my size, I just got a whistle and it comes running.
Yeah, perfect. All right, here we go. We're gonna get to some sponsors first. Recognize my sponsors. Thanks again to all those businesses and individuals out there for sponsoring. I had some computer issues, and my wife and I were on a ADHD medicine hunt tonight. I guess there's a statewide shortage, so I wasn't able to get my new background up. So there's a couple people on this that get some free sponsorships tonight. Anna and Jake. Otherwise, everyone else is sponsoring from last episode as well. If you can see on the screen there, that's Nick Schmidt, Levi Dunn Trucking, Miller and Sons Golf Cars, Jay Hiscox of State Farm Insurance, Eric Kroll of Ag Performance in Buffalo Center, Window World of Mason City, Swenson's Hardware, the Britt Car Truck Bike and Tractor Night Cruise, Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company, Daniel's Auto Collision, White Barn Picket Fence, the Dave Fink Memorial Fund, and Christy Dusenberry and her book Before We Open Presents. Like always, people sponsor this podcast to help raise money for the Sanger Legacy Fund. And with that money, we help fund the West Hancock Hall of Fame. We give scholarships out to graduating seniors. We support the athletic and activity funds at West Hancock as needed. And we give to community outreach programs as well. If you want to give, go to sangerstrong.com. You can get a hold of me if you want to sponsor the podcast as well. 5 episodes ago in episode 58, I talked to Beth Rasmussen. 20 episodes ago in episode 43 was Steve Kelly. 40 episodes ago in episode 23 was a playoff podcast for 2021 with Jay and Kevin. And then 60 episodes ago in episode 3 was Denny, Brumm. All right, I'm going to hit some sponsors here, and then Coach Benning and I are going to talk about what I call the good old days, because those were my good old days, I guess. So the Jay Hiscox State Farm Team in Britt is a proud supporter of West Hancock and the Sanger Legacy Fund. For a free quote or review, give Jay or Lindsay a call at 843-3563. Christy Dusenberry from Indianola wrote a book called Before We Open Presents. It's a great book to read before you open gifts on Christmas to remind you of the true meaning of Christmas. You can buy her book on the Amazon link I'll have posted on Facebook later tonight after I post this episode. And then Nick Schmidt is a 2000 West Hancock grad. He's a regular sponsor. He just wants to give back to the Sanger Legacy Fund, so thanks to Nick Schmidt for doing that. And then Amanda Crumweed, or Amanda Rasmussen, and her business, White Barn Picket Fence. They've been specializing in newborn and children's photography for the last 14 years in northern Iowa. She has locations in Algona and Clear Lake. You can shop also online at whitebarnpicketfence.com. And then the Dave Fink Memorial Fund honors the legacy of the late Dave Fink. Dave taught and coached at West Hancock pretty much all the years you were there, wasn't it? Or close to it.
Yep.
And then he moved on to Waverly Shell Rock. If you'd like to give to the Fink Memorial Fund, you can reach out to me or to Chuck Boozman, or you can look it up online, and we'll get you in the right direction. All right, Coach, here we go. I'm excited for this one. I played football for you my first 3 years. You were one of my teachers. A lot of good memories that we'll get to talk about. So how's the family? How's the job? What's new?
Good. The kids are all grown up now. Zach was born out in Illinois, but he attended school. God, was up till kindergarten and first grade maybe. But Abby and Molly have both moved on. Everybody's graduated. Zach's in Iowa City working. Just graduated from Iowa. Abby graduated from Mercy College in Des Moines, something like that. And then Abby just graduated 2 years ago, 2 years ago. And she's working out in Colorado. So I got one in Miami and one in Denver and one in Iowa City.
Nice.
And the wife is still doing speech therapy for the AA. So, and I'm still teaching. So I've done haven't pissed off too many people, I think.
Or there's just a teacher shortage and they know better than to,
Yeah, I'm actually needed, Dan. I'm
yeah,
needed.
yeah. That's our joke at our school every once in a while. I was like, what are they gonna do? Fire us? Like
Exactly. Who are
gonna
you
be
gonna get?
gonna be hard to replace us. So yeah, and you're at Aplington-Parkersburg. You went from West Hancock to AP. What would that have been in 2004? Spring of 2004?
98 to 04. So in the fall of 04, I started, I was here at AP.
Yep. And been there ever since. So it's at about 17, 18 years.
Yeah, I'm not a math teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. And you grew up in Ackley, correct? Or Geneva? I
Yes.
don't remember which one.
Yep. Yep. We left, when we left Britt, we moved back. It was actually worked out kind of nice. We were, mom and dad called and said, "Hey, we're going to sell the acreage. We're going to move to town into grandpa and grandma's house." And I said, "Hey, just wait a minute here. Let me talk to Melissa." And because she's from Parkersburg here. So let me talk to her. We might be interested in moving back, and we might be interested in buying it. And it worked out that she said, "Yep, that'd be fine." And it was great because kids got to see them grow up with the grandparents. Father-in-law passed away a couple of years ago, but they got to know him very well. I mean, it was a good move for the family.
Good, good. Can you hear that weird noise behind me and on my end? Are we good?
No,
Perfect.
you're good.
We just moved into a new house out here in Truro last week, and the room I'm in, the pipes from some water usage upstairs is right above me, and it's like
Somebody's flushing the toilet, Dan.
or taking a shower right now. But yeah, I'm like, I sure hope that's not audible, but it's definitely affecting my ability to listen right now. So Ackley Geneva, you graduated, was it 87?
88.
88. So you played against Coach Sanger in the 86 semifinals. Do you remember
Yes.
that game very well?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. It ended up being a good old fashioned, I call it a Bob Sanger 50-point ass kicking. Oh, sorry, butt kicking. 50-point Bob Sanger. He's going to score a touchdown every quarter, and you're not going to have a prayer.
Yeah. And it was a like just after a blizzard. So there was a ton of snow on the ground and freezing cold.
There was two games, I think, out of the entire state. They moved games to South Dakota, and they reshuffled the schedule to the Unidome. Only two games were played outside, and we were one of them. It was well, Denny Brumm, if you talk to him, he did announcing forever, and he said that was one, if not the coldest, the second coldest game he's ever been at. It was they didn't have those fast growing Oz trees that are there when we were growing up, and
Yeah.
and it had, I don't know how fast it was blowing, but it was blowing like a son of a gun. And I remember Kevin Sanger, we were all warming up, and Kevin Sanger's trying to kick off, and he kicks off and into the wind, and it ends up going backwards. Got a 5-yard penalty and had to do it again and say, well, it's not going to work.
Yeah. It's not going to change in the next 30 seconds.
So yeah, Ackley got, we got educated in North Iowa football in a hurry. Yes.
Yep. And then we went on to lose to Linville Sully 12-7 in the finals. Team we just played in the semis this year and beat them by 8. So
yep. And oh yeah, it just so you know, there's still residents in Britt that don't let me forget that. and they shouldn't, because they pummeled us. They had fun with us.
I would imagine. I think I heard my dad was telling me either the Finch or the Kelly boys or a combination of them. He was at the game and he goes, I'm wearing 4 layers and I'm still freezing and wondering what I'm doing here. He goes, a couple of those boys, those wrestlers, come out in short sleeves, nothing but their jersey on, and
Nothing but their jersey.
because I knew
If I remember right, Don Finch led the way out there. I think he was the one, and he was a big man.
Yeah.
He's still a big man, but he was an athletic sucker too. He led the crew out, and I think he might have grown a beard. I think he grows a beard overnight. But anyway, but he comes rumbling on the field. The first 4 or 5 guys just wearing their jerseys, like these guys aren't all there, you know.
Yeah. And those are the mesh jerseys too, so it's not
yes.
like at all. I mean, there's little holes just all throughout, so it was just ridiculous.
Yep. Oh yeah.
How about wrestling? I heard you were a pretty decent wrestler back in the day.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I was an early bloomer. I guess my first exposure to Britt was this. I was thinking of this. This is a good story here too. I was an early bloomer, and I doing a kids tournament. I was in 7th grade, and it was a kids tournament at Iowa Falls. 4-man round robin bracket, and I they didn't have the internet, right? They didn't know. I mean, nobody knew anybody. But Don Jones and Ron Jones over at Iowa Falls must have known some names, because in this 4-man bracket there was a kid I don't remember. I feel sorry for him because I beat him. And then there was me. I placed second, third, and first. Then there was Pat Kelly, who I think he qualified as a freshman, but he got third, first.
Mm-hmm.
In high school. And then there was Bart Chelsvig, an 8th grader who was a 3-time state champion at Webster City, and didn't know anything about it. Well, I forget that, like the one kid we wrestled, I don't know. Again, 7th grade now. I go out and shake hands with Chelsvig, and I'll be gosh dang, he tears into me. I got pummeled so bad. They didn't have the 15-point tech rule. I got beat 21-3 in 3 minutes in 3-minute match.
Jeez.
And then I was wrestling Pat Kelly from Britt, and I remember that was a tooth and nail knockdown drag out, and somehow blood went all over the mat. And back in the day, you don't stop the match for blood, but the blood was so bad the mat was getting slippery.
Oh, jeez.
They thought it was my nose, and so they kind of wiped it out. Again, 3 minutes now. They lay my head back, and it's not my nose, not my nose. So we go out and wrestle some more, and there's blood everywhere again. They're like, we got to do something. Somebody's bleeding. And so they lay my head back again, and I remember closing my eyes, and I got cut. My eyelid got cut.
Oh,
My one eyelid's now hanging down, and blood is gushing everywhere.
jeez.
And I specifically remember going, well, geez, they're not going to let me finish them. Thinking in my mind, they're not going to let me finish. And old Jones, the old longtime coach at Iowa Falls, I'll be right back. He runs in, grabs a headgear with a face mask, and it put it on and got it fixed, and we wrestled, and I got beat. Pat whooped me pretty good too. So, I mean, like I said, there was the Pat had 2, Chelsvig had 3, and I had one. There were 6 state titles in that bracket in 7th grade.
7th grade. And that
7th grade. We went on to win that many state titles.
And that other kid you can't remember, probably.
I wish I could remember his name, because I'd like to talk to him and then maybe apologize, or maybe the Jones family should call him and apologize. I don't know.
That was probably his last day of wrestling. He probably called it quits after that. It's like,
I don't remember, but yeah, I got beat up pretty good that day too.
Yeah.
And then, then in 86, fall of 86, had a decent squad and nice passing attack, little, passing attack, run the ball. And went up there, and I do remember I remember being cold, but again, you're playing, I wouldn't want to be standing on the sideline. That's for darn sure. And yeah, those poor people that had to stand on the sideline facing west, and no jackets, no nothing. It was, it had to be bad.
So, leaving Ackley. Oh, but one more question. I know he's from Wellsburg, and you guys weren't consolidated then. Did you know Jeff McMartin back in the day?
Not in the day. Yes, kind of, but he married my neighbor, Lori Rinkin.
Okay.
And Lori and I grew up. We were the youngest ones of the family. Well, Lori had a younger sister, but Lori and they had older brothers, and she had older brother and sisters, and I had an older brother and a sister. And so they were always doing stuff together. And Lori and I were just the little, they had to look after us.
Yeah.
So we were the tag-alongs. So, but anyway, she ended up marrying Jeff, and I got to know Jeff when I was out in Illinois doing a head coach out there. I had Jeff come out and do some camps for me, and what a fine individual. Oh man, what a class act.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't know watching this, Jeff McMartin's the head football coach at Central College in Pella, where I went to school. He took me in as a student coach when I realized I probably wasn't going to cut it in college as a player. And he's from Wellsburg, so before AGWSR it was a couple separate schools, and I'm used to like the Bob Sanger type of coaches in my world, and then I go to Central, and Jeff McMartin's about 5'6",
Oh yeah,
as much as my left leg,
very
and
soft spoken.
very soft spoken. But man, he gets results. He's been
Yep.
very, very successful. So I wasn't sure if there was a
When I
connection.
was out in Illinois, he was coaching at Beloit College,
Yep.
and Melissa and I would go up and see. I don't know, we only saw him a couple times. That was just down the road, 40, 50, 60 miles. Well, we'd stop out there. Nobody had kids yet, so you could do that.
Yeah.
uh,
Enjoy yourself once in a while. Yeah.
exactly, with no responsibilities. Yeah,
Yeah. 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 He's a good one.
yes, he is.
After you left Ackley, where'd you go to college?
You and I
And
wrestled
uh,
there.
how'd you do in wrestling?
I was on the team. We'll say that. there was a guy ahead of me. He was a year older than me. He's a 3-time All-American, Rich Powers. He's now superintendent at Bondurant.
Okay.
But he was a 3-time All-American and unorthodox as all get out. He did everything backwards, and it worked for him. But yeah, I couldn't beat him. But then my senior year, I finally got a chance to, I won the spot, and then I blew my ankle out, and so I was deprived or had to sit out until the end of the year. And yeah, so it was. I'm one of those guys that did not pan out. Just couldn't cut the mustard. Didn't make all the best decisions in the world that time of my life.
But hey, I mean, you and I's Division I program in wrestling, correct?
Yeah, we were top 10 team, top 10, 12 team every year.
Yeah. Just to be on the team alone, I'd say is not bad.
I learned a lot. I grew up a lot. You get beat up every day. You got to make changes or get beat up. And I got beat up a lot, and I made some changes, and it was a great experience, and I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad I had that opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. And so after you and I, where'd you end up?
Well, the social studies world, I graduated a social studies degree. Well, actually just history teaching degree. And there's not a lot of openings out there. Even today, there's not a lot of history openings.
Yeah.
So I remember I was pouring concrete here in Parkersburg. Well, while I was in college, I started coaching here at Parkersburg with Ed Thomas. And that was the fall of '89. So I've been coaching football since 1989. Through my years, I do just volunteer, come over and do what I can. And then wrestling got serious at the end of the year, which was fine. But I got a job. I was pouring concrete, graduated. I was pouring concrete in town here. And I sent out over 400 applications, and I got 2 interviews. And they were both in Illinois. One was in way southern Illinois, Pinckneyville, just north of Carbondale. And I didn't get that job. And then a little Catholic school in Freeport, Illinois. I got an interview there, and I ended up getting the job as a head football coach, head track coach, and 7-12 social studies teacher.
Nice. How long did you stay out there then?
4 years.
4 years. Any
Yep.
success in football and track?
Football was the year before I got the job. There was a small enough school. The senior class had like 24 kids, but the year when they were juniors, they canceled their varsity program because the numbers are too low, and it's pretty high quality football too.
Yeah.
So they canceled the varsity program. So I got called in to basically start it up again. And that first year, we won 1 game, and we probably should not have won that, but we did. What was it? I went 1-8, 2-7, 3-6, and then I finally had a winning season, 5-4. And 2 years later, they won a state title. So I'd like to think I had something to do with that, setting the stage and then just putting the foundation down.
That's not bad for just restarting a program too. 6 years or whatever to go to a state title.
There was a history rich school too. They won state titles in '81 and '86. So they knew football and they supported it, and they just didn't have the numbers. Like I said, the senior class had 24 kids. I think there was 115 kids in the whole school.
Yeah. And did you leave
track,
there?
I did have a state qualifier in track 1 year. They only have 2 classes of track in Illinois.
Oh, really?
So to qualify, you got to be pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And it was a kid in the triple jump. Like I know anything about triple jumping.
Jump 3 times, right?
And I don't even know. I still don't know if it's left, left, right jump or right, left, right, right. I have no idea. I just said, Jay, go do your thing. I said, don't get yourself too worn out because he was a pretty good long jumper too. I said, just pick one, just make sure you qualify. I knew enough coaching. I'm like, get this event over, qualifying this one, so you got enough energy to. It was basically spring football, and Jay was good enough to make it to the state. But yeah, that was impressive state track meet. I'll tell you what, it was 2 classes in Illinois with the big schools, East St. Louis to downtown Chicago. All those guys could run.
Yeah.
Holy cows.
Yeah. It was hard to compare to Iowa State
Yeah,
track, especially with 4
yeah.
classes. Yeah. And did you leave there to go to Britt, or there's another stop?
No, I left there. Zach was born out there. Made some great friends out there. And in fact, my friends are still coaching out there. Shout out to Lena Winslow Panthers. They won their 3rd straight state football title. Kevin Milder is a wrestling coach out there. He's from Clinton, and Rick Aaron's a head coach. Good friends of mine. Love them to death. Families, about my age, kids our age, did some hanging out with the families and that stuff. But I had an opportunity. It just didn't pay. I mean, at the time, I was teaching full time, and I was 2 head coaching positions, and I was making $14,900.
Oh, geez. In
Yeah,
Illinois.
in Illinois, a little more expensive. So, I mean, it was just a matter of time. I had to get out and support the family for real. And I had a job offer at Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Interviewed there, and wife and I went up there and looked at it, and it just didn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
And West Hancock interviewed me, and ended up getting that one. And I remember this is good too. I know we played them in '86, and I met some guys through high school wrestling and college wrestling. Met some guys from Britt and Kanawha, and I never knew the mascot. So we're pulling into the school in the northeast corner there of the school, and Melissa goes, "Hey, what's their mascot?" I'm like, "Gosh, I don't even know." Like, I scratched my head. I said, the only guys that I knew, we just called them freaking hobos. I don't know, they're hobos. I don't know, they're hobos. He's a hobo. It's all there was. I mean, they're just freaking hobos. They didn't have a school mascot. They're the hobos. I don't know.
A good mascot.
It would have been. But yeah, so in 94 to 98, I was in Illinois, and then fall of 98, came to West Hancock and taught at the junior high that year, and then moved to the high school when Perkins retired.
Yeah. We're going to get to some more of that here in a sec. I'm going to get to some sponsors, and we're going to talk about your time at Britt and Kanawha. All right, we got Michael and Brienne Ewing of Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company. They have locations in Britt, Kanawha, Clarion, Belmont, and Dow's. You can call them at 843-3839 or 762-3211. That's Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company. Then we have Daniels Auto Collision in Charles City with owner Jason Daniels, a 1990 West Hancock grad. You can call him at 641-220-3805 or check him out at danielsautocollision.com. Then we have the Showalter family and their business, Window World in Mason City. They're a proud supporter of the podcast. Once an Eagle, always an Eagle. Fly high, Coach Sanger and Joey Showalter. Miller and Son Golf Cars in just outside of Britt, family-owned operation with over 50 years of experience. Skip and Jim can be contacted at 843-4132 or check them out at millergolfcars.com. Then I have the Britt Car, Truck, Bike, and Tractor Night Cruise and owner of Mojo Productions, Jared Winger. He's sponsoring most of my podcasts in the past and a bunch coming up next year as well. You can give Jared a call at 515-408-1074 or go to brittcarcruise.com. Do you, Mr. Benning, remember the interview process in Britt, who'd you interview with and what that all entailed, who you kind of met right away?
Yeah, it was at the junior high, and I don't remember who was in the interview committee, but I remember the principal was Sue Wood.
Yep.
And she was a lot of fun too. She was really good. She ended up moving on to Fort Dodge curriculum something or whatever, but no, she did a really good job. I remember I remember working down there, and Marge Hanson was the secretary.
Yep.
I like to have some fun with Marge. I remember we did our Earth Day project or whatever, and I found like had to be a crowfoot or something, or a couple of them. I'm not sure what it was, but I had enough of them. I just kept putting them in her desk. And she'd open it up, and you could hear her scream down the hall, "Benning!"
Oh, I love Marge. Ryan Zatto, Justin Johnson, Chad Eisman,
Yep.
a bunch of us guys. We were on the newspaper team, the West Hancock Junior High newspaper team. And my job was the word search on the back page every month. And I guess Marge was a huge admirer of my work. So that was her favorite thing in the newspaper, was to go to the back and do the word search. And I'd always include something weird in there for her. Yeah, that was a good time. But yeah, Sue Wood, I have not heard that name in a long time. She would have been the principal my 7th grade year.
Yep.
And then she left, and then it was Gretchen DeVore, I believe, took over.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Yep, she would have been the reading teacher at the time, and then she moved
Yep.
over to principal. And you talked about filling out like 400 job applications. When I was trying to get my first job in '09, uh, I applied for hundreds of jobs as well, and I got an interview where she was the principal at Central City.
Oh
My
yeah.
worst interview I ever did in my life. And I'm pretty sure it was because I knew her and I was kind of nervous about that.
She
And
knows me. She knows I was a naughty kid.
yeah, and oh man, I left that and I went, if she hires me, she is desperate. And she called me, and before she said anything, I said, I know. She's like, yeah, it didn't go so well, or something like that. So yeah.
Uh,
What was it like teaching down in Kanawha? Just a
oh
little
God,
bit, right?
it was a good group of teachers. Again, it was a lot of fun. It was just had that long hallway, and you had I remember the phones. That was like the first time I ever had phones in my room.
Yeah.
And so you just childish. You know the room number, so you'd call the room number and they'd pick up, and they'd have to leave whatever they're doing, and you'd hang up on them. Let's see. Then Abel's. I think what was Abel's? She was
Greeny.
a librarian,
Yeah.
and I would bring Zach down, and Zach was still in diapers, and I would bring Zach down, and I'd do whatever, and he was old enough to move and run around, so I'd do whatever, but I'd have to change his diaper. I remember every chance I got had to change a diaper. Everyone, I'd go down in the library and I'd put it in her desk. she'd come marching down, Benning, Benning, and I just laughed. It was good. Doug Sickles was there. We had a lot of fun with Doug. I think he's at Cresco now.
Yep, I just did a podcast with him a couple weeks
Yeah,
ago.
I saw. Yeah. That's what made me. I'm trying to think of some other ones there. Kurt DeVore was there.
Mrs.
Vocal.
Bowman.
Oh yeah, again, you get to my age and you meet so many kids and teachers, it's hard to remember. But yeah, I just remember it was a lot of fun and serious education, but it was still good people to work with.
Yeah. Ruth Verberge, she was the
Yep.
math teacher. Now
Math
she's
teacher
been
down on the other end. Yep.
for many years. So. Mrs. Caspers,
Yes.
art teacher. Oh man,
Yes.
we used to get her fired up. I don't think it took a whole lot, but she loved it. Like it would be like a playful, fired up. I
Right.
think she enjoyed it most of the time, maybe, or I'm just trying to make myself feel better about how we acted. But yeah,
Yeah, no, that gosh, we had um, a bunch of teachers in that crew. Hootie and the Blowfish was in concert at the Surf, and a bunch of us. That was one of the things we just did. I mean, you hang out together, and we ended up going there that night. And man, that was a good time that night too. But no, it was good people down there. I enjoyed that.
Yep. And you were just there for the 1 year, you said.
Just 1 year. Yep.
And the group you came in with, so other teachers that got hired that same year, Casey Angle Cohagen. I had never heard that name before. Do you remember who that was?
I do not remember that
I
one.
saw that in the paper during my research doing this. I'm like, that name does not even ring.
I remember Cohagen, but again, it didn't stick around, so I
Yeah.
don't recall that.
Yep. Then there was Michelle DeHart, who's still there.
Yep.
She's the elementary principal.
Yep.
Sherry Jones. That name sounds familiar, but I can't place who she is. And then Chuck Block was the high school principal,
Yep.
and my next door neighbor across the street neighbor.
He was my 7th grade math teacher and my wife's high school math teacher.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep. And then ended up being your principal in Britt.
And he's from Wellsburg.
Oh, nice. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, his dad was a longtime coach in Wellsburg.
Do you remember at the high school the shop class fiasco for a couple years in Britt?
Yeah.
Mr. Brown, nicest guy in the history of the world.
Oh yeah.
Stuff happened in that shop.
Yep.
And, they had to put security cameras in there, and I think Mr. Block just ended up watching the security footage all day long to make sure things weren't bad down there.
Yep.
Ryan
He was an ornery sucker too.
Yeah.
I mean, he wrestled for Iowa State out of Mason City. Yeah, he was an ornery. I wouldn't have messed with him.
We did. And
I know you did.
One day in detention in the weight room, it didn't go well for us. A couple of us got beat up a little bit. We'll just put it that way. Statute of limitations have passed at this point, so I think we're good.
Right.
But Ryan Meyer and I staged a fight one day. I pretended like I was banging Ryan's head on the heater in the back of the shop classroom. And all of a sudden, Mr. Block comes running in there. Get your hands off him. And Ryan just stands up and goes, just kidding. And he was not happy. But
no.
But I think Block was there through was he the principal there when I graduated? Was he there when you were your last year? I think he ended up leaving after my senior year, but we had a new superintendent, an interim guy, Harold.
Him and Brummer knew each other somehow, and Brummer moved on. I think Mr. Block moved on as well.
The following year, I believe, after I graduated, I think so.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Then Harold Overman came in as an interim superintendent for a year after my senior year. Yep. And then there was some guy named Chuck Boozman that showed up that same year as you. Have any good Chuck Boozman stories?
Ones that I can share, not as many as the ones I can't share.
Get creative.
No, it was one of those things. Again, we're about the same age. I'm a tick older than him. But there's a whole group of us about the same age that came through there. Fink was one of them. Ben Muller, Boozman, me, and then we got hooked up with Steve Kelly, and then Don Hildman was in the neighborhood. Robin Drake was down the street from us, and he lived next door to Steve and Deanne. And just, it was like, I just remember summertime, it was a given because we all had little kids running around.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't matter. I'm not going overboard. And when I say that, it was easily 4 nights a week in the summertime, because Chuck coached softball, and Jen needed help with the kids, or just didn't need help, but it was easier when there's a bunch of us around. Mm-hmm. I bet we grilled out 4 nights a week.
Yeah. And
just come over, hang out, grill, everybody go home 8, 9 o'clock, tuck the kids into bed, and do your thing that way. It was a lot of fun with those guys. And yeah, Chuck was next door to me. And it was good that way. Yes.
So you were neighbors. I didn't even know you guys were next door to each other.
Oh, in the school.
Oh, at the school. I didn't mean in town. I didn't know where either of you lived, honestly.
No, geez, I'm trying to think. I lived in the vet apartment buildings. Alex is the kid, played football at Central.
Alex DeWard.
Yep. Dr. Ward. Yep. Moved into his apartments, and then we moved in beside Fetter's boys, right by the hospital, west of the hospital.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Melissa and I had a little house there we rented from the Cheezick family.
Okay.
And then Then we moved into, oh crap, south of town, long driveway. He played tight end for us. Farmers. The grandpa lived across the street from the Kanawha Junior High.
Was he about my age or older?
No, he's older than you. He probably graduated in about 99 or 99. Yeah, probably 99. But anyway, lived out in the country for a while. Then we bought a house beside Chuck and Lois Conway
Okay.
out there by the golf course. Bought Sue Wood's old house when she moved out.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And you said you went 1 year at Kanawha and then transferred over to Britt. Based on what I heard about diapers and crow's feet, did you get involuntarily transferred, or were you hoping to get to the high school?
No, it was because I Terry Heeman was a head coach, wrestling coach, and he was getting his principal's degree, and he just said, I don't have time or the commitment level that it needs. Go ahead and I'm going to step out. You can have it. And I don't know. I guess I'm old school enough that I think if I'm going to be a head coach, I want to be around the kids. You know, I want to see them. I want to talk to them. I want to know what they're like on game day. And if they're acting up, hey, settle down a little bit, back off, or hey, you better get your mind right, type of thing. Wrestling, check their weights. You know, just all sorts of things. Just being around the kids, and so it was a good fit.
Mm-hmm. Good. There was a guy there at the high school, Bob Sanger. You ended up coaching for him. What I found in my research, you started as a volunteer assistant, then end up getting a paid position due to increased numbers. The paper said in 1993, so before you got there, there was about 56 kids on that team playing 2A football. By 98, there were up to 85 kids out for high school football at West Hancock. So they decided they needed another full-time paid assistant, and that got to be you.
Yep.
It was kind of funny to me that one board member said no. I don't know who the board member was, but kind of surprised me and Britt that would happen.
There's always got to be one dissenter. Maybe they knew more than we did.
Yeah. What was it like stepping into the West Hancock program with a Bob Sanger and eventually filling in for Gene Perkins as D coordinator?
You know, it's a little bit awestruck. But I do remember, you know, I was fairly confident as in myself. I mean, but I had been a head coach, and before I was a head coach, I was around a pretty good guy by the name of Ed Thomas. Learned a lot from him. Got to implement some of the things that he taught me into my own program, and got to run my own program that way. And so I was confident going in. I guess I didn't know how much my concern. You know, he was with Gene for so long, Coach Perkins, and they were together, and they were like peanut butter and jelly, peas and carrots, however you want to look at it. They just went well together, and they didn't have to worry about what the other one was doing. I guess I was a little nervous on what the expectation was. And Coach Sanger, I said, all right, so what do you want me to do? He said, run the defense. What? He says, you got the defense. I said, what do you want me to do? I don't care. Don't let them score.
Yes, sir.
And you know, and he honest to goodness, it was gone. I mean, he had, you know, I asked him for input, but he never interjected anything. But it was awestruck coming in. I'm like, all right, this is a pretty, and at the time we were a 2A school. I mean, that's a part of the reason why the numbers jumped too. Geez, we were 2A for 3 years or 2 years there. But it was, you know, I didn't want to disappoint anybody. I knew that, and let alone, you know, Coach Sanger, let alone the town, because you can, or the communities, because you can tell it's important. And so I guess I'd like to be my own biggest critic. But it was interesting. I mean, it was very gratifying as well, because he said, it's yours, go do what you want to do.
Yeah, that takes a lot of courage from the head coach. You know, it's his program and his kind of neck on the line for the success or lack thereof.
His name's at the top of the list when things go bad.
Yeah, to not micromanage, that says a lot about the guy. We're gonna go kind of school year by school year here, but before we get into more like wrestling and football, uh, I always tell the story. September 11th, 2001.
Oh yeah.
I was a freshman, and that all happened that day. I was in Mrs. Sanger's keyboarding class. First period, we found out what was going on. We raced down to shop class. Second period, turned the TV on. Third period, we got down to your class, and it was just, I think it was that whole rest of that week was just watching the news,
It was.
what was going on. You're recording it on the VHS tapes and stuff like that. I tell my students every year I do social studies in fourth grade, and I can vividly remember like where I was sitting in your classroom watching that um, footage
One
of,
of
of
one of
September.
the 3 TVs that were in the school.
Yeah, yep. And we never took advantage of the one in the shop by any means or stretch, So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, that was I remember that well too. And yeah, and the scare, just the sheer unknown, what's gonna happen,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
And I remember probably the most, other than winning, I mean, football, non-related football, I remember Carly Schultz. Carly Schultz, was it?
yep, yep.
She was a heck of a singer. And I remember we played the game that Friday night, and she sang Lee Greenwood's song, and she belted that sucker out. And I'm just like, I was emotional. And then
Mhm.
I mean, that wasn't really even football, but it was around a football game. And holy cow, that was a weird time. And again, I teach social studies at the high school, and I spend 2 or 3 days every year on that as well.
Yeah, yeah. Did we cancel? We canceled football practice that night. I think everything got canceled that
Yep,
day
yep,
because I got home. We lived in that old church at the time across from the
yeah,
Catholic church, and
yep.
my sister was a senior. She's a Carly's classmate, and she goes, "Let's go get some gas." And I'm like, "Why?" And she goes, "We got to get gas now because there's going to be a shortage." I'm like, "I still don't understand what the heck you're talking about." And she explained with this happening and stuff, the oil comes from over there, and all right, and we're like a block and a half from Casey's, and we start like 2 blocks down towards Main Street in line to just get to the gas station. You were about 2 or 3 cars ahead of
Yep.
us.
Yep.
And
I
I
remember the
remember,
line went east and then south, and then it was just
yeah,
wrapped all around.
and we were still probably 30 minutes from getting to the gas tank. And you were out of your car, like stretching, because it was a couple hours of,
Oh, yeah.
and you turned and saw me sitting in the car with my sister. And you said, Crawl, get over here. And you had me sit in your car so you could go get something to eat at Casey's and take a leak, I think. I don't
And
know if you
hence,
remember that, but I
this
remember
is
that.
me now. It's me.
Yeah, remember that vividly. I was like, I am in Coach Benning's car and I don't have a license, and I sure hope I know how to move it 2 feet at a time every couple minutes. But that was some of the things I remember the
Well, I'm
most.
glad you remembered that. Don't remember what you learned in class, but I'm glad you remember that.
Yep, I remember Coach Benning had to use the restroom and get some beef jerky, and I needed to move his car.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, let's get 1998 football season. I don't know how this team missed the playoffs. 7-2, but back then it was a lot tougher to get in, even with 16 teams. You had studs out there, and one guy that always stands out to me on that team is Mike Stripling. I'd go to the games with my dad, and he would say I would go there just to watch that animal pull on a trap play, just to watch him tear someone's head off.
That
Uh,
was a man child. Strip was a man child. Was he
yeah,
about 6'3", 225 pounds?
and just
He had
fast.
the perfect mentality. He was just going to hit somebody.
Yep. Uh, what do you remember about that season? Just crazy that it was. That was a
You
good team.
know, I don't remember it that well. I remember being disappointed at 7-2 and we're not getting in. And I can't even remember. Do you remember who we lost to? Do you have that in front of you?
Emmitsburg.
Yep.
I don't have the rest in front of me. I should know it. Was it Lorenz Marathon that year? Or was that the next year?
It was. It was at Lorenz.
32
Yes,
to
it was.
20, I believe.
Yes. Nothing went right that night down there. And you're down in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, things that I do remember that just being disappointed. I'm like, that screwed us right there.
Yeah.
That takes 2 losses in the district. There's no way we're getting in.
No,
And
there's
then
no at large.
after that, it was just Katie bar the door. We're going to knock some heads. We're going to get our money's worth here. And I do remember that. Gosh dang it. I remember why do I remember Forest City one night? And I remember now that you say that, down at Lorenz. Cause I was driving the equipment van, the van that you had to turn this way to go that way. And you drifted all over the road. But no, that was a heartbreaking year, just for the fact, I was still pretty young and I didn't really get see the big picture of things in general. I was still pretty much win or you're a failure. And if you don't make the playoffs, you're a failure. And, that might've been one of probably again, I like to be my own biggest critic, or I sit back and look and say, hey, 7-2, we lost to pretty good football teams and we won 7 games. How many other teams would love to be in this 7 wins?
Yeah.
It kind of brought me back to, I learned some of that out in Illinois when I had 12 guys on my varsity squad, and we're not going to win games, so let's get something out of this. And what are we going to get? And I guess I kind of put that behind me. I'm like, all right, we're in Britt, we're going to do, or West Hancock, we're going to win. No, we're going to do nothing but win. And I think I lost track of that after that year, or during that year, because of the expectations. And I didn't really know the communities yet. And I thought it was just win, win, win.
Mhm.
And Coach Sanger kept things in check, well, they beat us. They scored more points than we did,
Yep. And then you hear one of his pep talks at a pep rally, and you're like, he talked for 15 minutes and didn't mention football one time.
Not once.
Yep.
Not once. It's amazing.
Yep. And people were on the edge of their seats. And I remember even, middle school, high school is like, he didn't mention football, but I want to go out and accomplish something after that guy said something.
Exactly. He always talked about being a great person. Always talked about, this is going to be over someday. We got to do something.
Yep.
What are we going to do?
Yeah, it just always blew my mind how he could captivate an entire gym full of people. And
Yep.
he's the football coach of, it's not like he's a great person, gives great talks, and we go 4-5 every year. It was,
Yeah.
no, this is a state championship winning coach that can get that out of people without even having to talk about the sport that he coaches. It just
Yep.
was always crazy. So
Yep. I
let's keep
remember
moving. Oh, go
probably,
ahead.
hey, one thing I remember about him through all the years and sitting in that back coach's room and whatever. And I just remember he had them big sausage fingers. It was just like this thing. And wherever you were sitting, there's this big finger. And he pointed at you and he'd say, by God, we're going to do something about that. And that big sausage finger would be like, okay. you know, uh,
Get your attention in more ways than one.
yes.
Yeah. Your first wrestling season, like you said, Terry Heeman was the head coach. You were the assistant. Some names I put down: Mark Muth, Josh Hartman, Jason Steinlich, Nick Schmidt, Corey
Nick Schmidt, I was going to
Shields,
say, don't miss him. He was on that squad.
Mark Sanger, Jake Zool, and Jason Beaver. A lot of names I remember and know, personally as well. It wasn't the Al De Leon days of the wrestling program at this point. The powerhouse of the 60s, 70s, and 80s and early 90s. But just like football, what was it like being a part of a tradition-rich program like Britt/West Hancock Wrestling?
Honestly, I probably knew more about the wrestling aspect of things, just because that's what I did and the people I knew. And it was I was probably more disappointed because I wrestled against those guys, when they hit tail end of the powerhouse or whatever. But wrestling, like a lot of sports, is a numbers game, and our numbers were just down. It wasn't that we didn't have the fight in kids; it's that we didn't have, the ability. It's just numbers, and I hadn't coached wrestling for 4 years that I was out in Illinois. So I was out of it. It was a good year to break in that way, and get things going. And it was, again, wrestling is so individual. One kid can care you can be his whole life. And the next kid can just be there to, I'm out to do it. And I want to be a part of it.
Mhm.
And I think our numbers, God, I don't know if did we have 20 kids out? I think we were in the teens all those years. But it's just hard. And some of the kids had high expectations of themselves, and it's a tough battle in that part of the state for wrestling. And it was, and Heeman did a great job leading the way and helping me get my feet on the ground and getting squared away. It was, it was a good year. And it was, again, so much. As an assistant football coach, I can show up in Sanger's practice schedule. We're going to do a couple things, move on. Wrestling is so much more. It's a legalized street fight, but there's so many. It's a chess match and it's a ballet all at the same time, and it's just weird. And then you got to throw in the fact that some guys are cutting some weight and probably not doing it the right way, and things. God, and speaking of that, I can't remember if it was that year or the year that I took over. I think one of our second tournament was at Algona, and Jake Zool wasn't feeling real well after his first match. I said, "Well, just relax, go shower up. I don't know if he's getting sick or what, but or go hang out in the locker room or whatever." And I remember going into the locker room. I hope his kids aren't listening to this because they'll laugh at it. But I remember walking in the locker room. Zool's in the shower, and he's got his head on the wall, and the water's rolling on him, and there's just a pile of puke below him. And then Jake never got too fired up. Anytime he just kind of looks at me, he says, "I don't think I should have ate that scrambled eggs and sausage, Coach." I look down, I'm like, "I don't think so either, Jake."
Yeah. Well, did he wrestle his next match?
Oh yeah, tough kid. All those kids
Yeah.
are tough kids. Nick was this heck of a scrapper. And Jake was a good athlete out there rolling around. He didn't like to lose. You got Muth, you got Halick, you had Thompson in there, Sanger in there, all those guys you mentioned. Yeah, none of them like to lose.
Yeah.
And that's something you can't coach. And but it was a very, again, just the organization aspect of it really kind of opened my eyes, like, oh geez, this is not just come in and wrestle around. I mean, you got to teach, and this kid's got a weak spot there and this kid's weak there, so you got to kind of mesh all that together. It was a learning experience for me there.
Yeah. Mark was a sophomore that year. Mark Sanger. Did you know he was going to be a state champ in a couple years? Could you tell already at that point?
Oh, again, you kind of, as a wrestling coach, you just kind of like, this kid can make it there and he can be on the stand. This kid works hard enough, he should be on the stand. And the kid deserves to be there. You kind of generalize it more than anything. And then if you do get, by the time Sanger was a senior, it's like, don't screw this up. Don't screw him up. Don't overcoach him. Just get him to wait. Just, don't screw it up, because he's got a good chance of doing some damage down there when he gets there. And again, that was a learning aspect for me too, that not everybody can shoot a double leg. Not everybody, not everybody sprawl or is quick enough to sprawl or whatever. It's just a whole hodgepodge. You got 6'3" guys, you got 5'3" guys, and the styles don't match, and it was interesting. But no, there's some tough kids in that group too. I like them a lot.
Yeah, definitely. All right, we're going to hit a couple sponsors here and keep moving. Levi Dawn Trucking is my next sponsor. You can call Levi at 641-860. Oh, timeout.
I'm going to run to the restroom, so take your time.
I'm going to slow it down. Yeah.
Talk slow.
Yep. This is a first on the podcast.
Come on, Dan.
All right, I'm going to talk really slow here. Thanks to Levi Dawn Trucking for sponsoring all these episodes. You can call Levi at 641-860-0077 or look him up on Facebook. That's Levi Dawn Trucking and Britt. Thanks to Kurt Kopacik down in Georgia for sponsoring the podcast. Kurt's a great dude. Works for Vermeer. He donated the Sanger cornhole boards last year that we raffled off at Hobo Days. So thanks to Kurt Kopacik for being a generous sponsor donor. Swenson's Hardware is your local independently family-owned hardware store since 1977. They're located in downtown Britt, Iowa. Swenson's is proud to serve Britt, Hancock County, and all the surrounding towns. You can check them out at swensons.doitbest.com. And then one of my favorite siblings, I should say he's my favorite since he helped me move into this new house last week. That's Eric Kroll with Ag Performance in Buffalo Center. Ag Performance is the leader in conventional seed throughout the Midwest. You can contact Eric at 515-341-3361 if you're looking for a higher net return on your fields. That's Eric Kroll with Ag Performance, 515-341-3361. Just want to thank all my sponsors again for giving to the Sanger Legacy Fund. And while I have a second here, I've had a few people ask me how the book project's going. If you don't know, I'm writing a book about the history of Britt, West Hancock, football and wrestling. I just finished up the football stuff with the season wrapping up, and I'm on 1978 in the wrestling section right now, creating that record book and then the chapter book. So, are you feeling better?
Yes, I got all prepared. I had some water. I probably drank too much trying to get on, but yeah, so I'm good to go.
I tell you what, I'm 36, but as a teacher, I can't just get up and go to the bathroom whenever I want. As an elementary teacher, today it was about 4 hours before I could actually get to the restroom. So if there's a bathroom nearby and I have more than 30 seconds, I'm taking that opportunity every time. Doesn't matter if I went 20 minutes prior. I'm like, I might as well go.
I tell people I feel like Pavlov's dog.
Yeah.
I react to bells. Bell rings, got to pee. Bell rings, time to eat.
Yep, pretty much. Yeah. So let's go to 1999 here. We're going to kind of breeze through a few of these seasons here. 1999 football team went 7-3, made the playoffs, but lost in the first round on the road to Iowa Falls. Josh Hartman talked about that game a little bit in his podcast. And so did another person that played on Jason Harley. He talked about that game, how it was we should have won that game, and I believe Emmitsburg would have been next, but at least to get a playoff win would have been good. In wrestling, Mark Muth made it to state. Sanger got third as a junior. Mark did not place. Did he win a match there? I can't remember. Did he go? I can't remember how that went.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did, because I remember sitting in the corner of his match, and he wrestled a kid from somewhere in southeast Iowa. And I remember looking across the way in the other coach's corner. I'm like, that's my old high school teammate, Brett Mays. Ackley's had 3 state champions, and 2 of them were coaching on the same mat that day. Brett Mays was an 87 grad, played, and he was a senior that day in Britt, that football game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Muth was wrestling, and Brett Mays was across the mat from me, and Brett won that, or Mark beat Brett that day. So Benning got the best of Mays on that one.
And you probably haven't let him forget about that either.
I have not.
That's good. Yeah. How close was Mark wrestling for a championship that year, Mark Sanger?
Oh gosh, was it Eben? I think Curtis Eben, or is it Eben? He got beat by a 2-time state champ, or if he wasn't, a 2-time finalist, from either Kingsley Pearson or I want to say it was an Eben. Okay. I forget, but that guy was a true stud. Mark's a stud too. This guy was another year older type of stud. And he didn't get blown out or anything, but it was a good match. But I wish I could have done a better job coaching and gotten him ready for it. And that's one of those hindsight things, what could have, should have, would have been.
And that was your first year as the head coach, so you were learning a lot. And,
yep.
Kind of figuring things out, even though you had a year as assistant under your belt. But when you're the man, it's a little bit different. It's easy to sit back and watch the head guy do something and go, I'd do this differently. But when you're in that spot, it's
armchair quarterback, baby.
Yep. It's easy to Easy to do that, but not easy once you're in that spot. So let's move on to 2000 here. That would have been my 8th grade year, Mark Sanger's senior year. Football team went 9-2, made it to the quarterfinals, but you ran into this team named Emmitsburg, and the last game of that season didn't end up so well, 40-0. How do you go about navigating through a game like that where you know it's like this isn't going well against a team that's going to win a
Well,
state title?
I can tell you that we had high hopes coming into that game with Halick and Thompson, and there's another Thompson, and um, oh crap, he was our center. Julie was his sister. Um,
Oh,
he was our center, number 53.
I know her, Julie. I'm drawing a blank too.
Prignitz, Justin Prignitz.
There you go, Justin.
He was our center. And just kind of setting the team up. And Schubert was on there. I see John Schubert every now and then. He's working for a seed corn company. He stops by and asks if we have any kids anyway. But anyway, the first game, well, back to Prignitz, is like, gosh dang it, this kid needs to be on the field. He's athletic. He can run. He can do some things. He's played center for us. I'm like, I got to find a place for him on defense, and it just nothing fit naturally. And I remember I asked Coach Sanger, I'm like, hey, do you think he could play free safety for us? He goes, try him. So I remember Justin Prignitz, number 53, playing free safety for us. Now, how many number 53s do you see starting center and free safety? That's the first and only time I've ever seen that. But I do remember that. But going into because Emmitsburg was in our district that year, and the first time we played them at home, and we played them for homecoming, and it was a rainstorm. There was something like 16 fumbles that night.
Yeah,
and it was just bad snaps and whatever else. And we got beat. We were ahead 12-6 at halftime, and ended up getting beat 18-12 or something. I forget. So Coach and I were sitting around. Okay, we feel pretty good. Let's make the changes we need to make. We'll get this squared away. We feel pretty good going into this game. And then as it turned out, we ended up hosting them. So Emmitsburg was a district champ. They played at home. We were on the road or something. I forget. Yeah, we had to be on the road.
We were both at home because we played Ballard of Huxley and beat them 15-6.
Yep, the Bombers. Yep.
But if you both hosted, it went by alphabet, I believe.
Yes.
And the Grundy Center friends of mine that we talked about earlier, they always joke. One year it's Britt West Hancock, the next year it's West Hancock Britt, and I'm like, yep, we know what we're doing.
Whatever works. We know that. I just tell them we know it.
I think they, whatever it was, went backwards to forward. We were West Hancock, so I think we got to host the game, even though they beat us and we're a district champ, which makes no sense. But
exactly. But I remember going into the game feeling pretty good about it. And so just take care of business, and they've got a really good team. I remember sitting in Boozman's office. He was a guidance counselor at that time, just watching film wee hours of the morning. And I watched him, I watched some more, and I watched some more. And I'm like, these guys' average scoring drives are anywhere from 3 to 7 plays. They are just that good. So I'm thinking, man, we're going to have to really, be fundamental and hang on to the ball, get first downs, and if we can make them drive anything more than 7 plays, I think we got a chance. And that first game, boy, I knew they were good, and they were Emmitsburg in general. They were kind of jaw jacking. I mean, just running their mouths and just all fired up. And if it was just them on each other, I don't remember, but they were pretty vocal. And I remember they came to Britt, and I knew they were not happy, as well they shouldn't have been, that they had to travel to Britt to play. I remember them getting off the bus, kicking our butts, getting on the bus, and not hearing a word from them. They were all business.
Yeah.
And then, but you ask, what do? You look at it, we're getting pummeled. All right, fellas, you want to get beat 80-0? Well, then we got to start fighting. Why do we practice all year? Why do we do these things? We do this because, again, classic Sanger, don't always talk football at halftime. This is about being a man. This is about doing what's right. This is about, by God, believing in yourself. By God, this is about believing in yourself. you know? But and I remember just thinking, holy cow, they were good. And this was a couple years after that. And I was sitting with coach at a state in the dome at a state football game. And all those old timers hang out. And I was just happy to be there. And I'm still young at the time, 30 something or whatever, about your age. And I said, gosh dang, Coach Twait, that was a good team you guys had. And he was a gentleman. Coach Twait was a gentleman. He just, yeah, he kind of shook his head. He says, scratched his head a little bit. And he says, yeah, that was probably one of the best 3 teams that I can remember. I'm like, great. No wonder we couldn't beat you. It's one of the best 3 ever. You got a trophy case full of titles and participation, semis, runners up. And that was one of the best 3. I'm like, come on, coach.
Like, oh boy.
Yeah, they were good. That was a good team. I think the guys, what was the name? There was a Hinners on that team. And then there was a kid that Sanger wrestled. Oh, Matheson was his name. And he was a state champ too, in 2A, and we were 1A. And they came over and wrestled in our gym, and that was a whale of a match too, early in the year. And they both went on to win titles, and they were both linebackers. They were both running backs, and it was a good one.
Yeah. Speaking of wrestling, this was the year 2001. The winner of 2001, where Mark won a state title, beat Michael Irvin, not the Dallas Cowboy Michael Irvin. This one's from Bedford. I don't remember the complete backstory on this kid, but wasn't he like a state finalist the year before, or he was placed pretty high, and they were talking that it was supposed to be a pretty good title match, and then Mark pinned him in 1 minute and 45 seconds. Just dominating. I remember watching it in the kitchen of Mark's Pizza. I don't know if you ever peeked back into my dad's kitchen, but there was a fridge in the back corner where that bathroom was. There's a little tiny, like 13-inch TV up there that was as wide as it was, the screen was, or as deep in the back. And we're watching it, and my dad's like, okay, I have about 5 minutes before I have to check on the next pizza. And he's like, well, that didn't take very long.
Yeah.
What was that like coaching a state champ?
Well, that was a fun year, even in football, it happens in football and wrestling and other sports as well. And I saw it firsthand here at AP when you need some athletes, and you need to make the right calls, and a lot of things got to happen right. But when there's a chemistry amongst the kids, that they really bond together, and they'll do anything for you, for them, for themselves, for their teammates, do whatever it takes. And I look at that class, and to me, I consider them my friends now. The Muth, Halick, Thompson was in there, and I know I'm going to forget one. Sanger, Hartman,
Jason
Steinlich, the Steiner, yeah. I mean, I still call those guys. I go to nationals, I go to Denver, and I see Hartman, and I call Steinlich, and Muth I talk to quite often, and Halick, I see him every now and then, and it's fun. But that group of kids, it was, in my mind, I look back that they had something special. I just wish there was more of them in that group, to work together. And gosh dang it, I might cry here. this might be one of my most heartbreaking stories. I talk about the kids that deserve to be there and that do everything right, and they never make it. We always talked about being at Vets Auditorium. They just had the little yellow ropes and to keep people off the mat. And always talked about being on the inside of the ropes. You don't want to be a spectator. You want to be a participant. You do things right. You live right. You do this. You do that. And Josh Hartman got beat in the district finals, and that just crushed me. And Muth got beat that day, and they're both seniors, and Mark was there, and Halick was doing everything right. He wanted to be there in the worst way, and Hartman, Muth, and those guys I think those guys ended up third. That's like kissing your sister. That was heartbreaking, and it was in the Pocahontas gym. I remember that. That was one of the days that I truly cried out of, and again, I may tear up here, but kids that deserved to be inside the ropes, and they didn't get it. They came up short, and man, did I kick myself. I still kick myself. I look back, and I know I got to let it go, but I can't, because they did everything asked of them. They did more, and they cared. And it was that important to them. And I guess I take it personal, a little bit personal. I take it a lot personal. I think I failed them. I failed them because they did everything I asked of them and more. And gosh, dang it, they're great people now. And that, I guess that's my only resolution to that day in Pocahontas gym, that they turned out great, even though I failed them, and in that situation. And I remember moving on, let's get a little happier. The Steinlich, I'm heartbroken from these guys not making it. And Sanger, geez, well, let's start with him first. The 189-pound finals comes up, and he's got his ticket to state, right? He's last year's third placer. Kid, he's got to wrestle. He goes, they shake hands, they blow the whistle. Mark shoots in, picks this guy up, and it started in the middle of the mat. He shoots so hard, it's like a tackled at the 50-yard line, drove him back 10 yards. It ends up on the edge of the mat. He picks this guy up. Now, in wrestling, you're responsible for the safe return of the guy that you take off the mat. And Mark is so amped up. Every muscle in his body and his eyes were flexed, everything. And I'm just like, I just remember screaming, easy, easy. And the gym's going crazy. And I remember he just picks him up, takes him back to the middle of the mat, and he just laid him down like Velcro, and the kid never moved. And I'm like, yeah. And Sanger comes running off, and I stick my hand out for a high five, and he hit me so hard. Fuck. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, holy crap. It still stings if I think about it.
So he was one bad mistake at that point from getting disqualified.
Oh yeah. And I mean, he was that all wound up, and that just tense. I'm like, oh geez, he's gonna get thrown out of the tournament, just all those nasty things popping in your head quick there. But no, he laid him down and it was over. I'm like, okay, relax. Now let's get Steinlich, get him in. We got one kid down there. The other three I failed. Mark's in. Last chance of Steinlich at the new 215-pound weight class. Steinlich ends up winning the match, and he's now a sectional champion. And on our way home, Steinlich looks over me. He says, "Hey, coach, that's the first tournament I've ever won in my entire life."
You said it was a district title?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, all right. So then, yeah, he went on and he ran into a couple of buzzsaws down there too. He ended up getting sixth.
Yep.
Not pleased. He should have got fifth. I blame that on the referee, and I still talk to him about it to this day. I'm like, what's the definition of a takedown? He had both hands in his armpits. His head was behind him. He had a leg hooked. How is that not a takedown? Or is that the definition of a takedown? And then, because you can't question their calls, so you got to, as a coach, you can't question their calls, but you can question the rules. So
Yeah.
that's, you had to be real careful because you lose a point. I'm like, so I need clarification on a rule. What qualifies as a takedown? And I explained, this is on the mat. Did he have his thumbs in his hands behind his armpits? Yep. Did he have a leg hook? Yep. Is that not the definition of two? Nope, didn't have it. And he walked away. I'm like, I'm not even going to tell you the guy's name because he's a friend of mine, but I still question him on that. And I'm still not happy with him, and he knows it.
Yeah, don't blame you there. For the sake of time here, let's keep going through a couple of these
Oh,
years.
yeah. He gets better with Irvin.
Yeah,
Irvin
Michael
Sanger
Irvin.
match. In state finals. It comes out, Irvin's just got a motor. Holy cow. And he's built just like Sanger, big muscle box, right? And he has got a motor. He's jacked up. He's pacing back and forth. And I mean, he's coming, he's shooting, he's going all the time. And you knew that all the time coming in. I'm like, Sanger, just let's weather the flurry here to start the match. And let's just wrestle after that. Well, Irvin comes at him doing Michael Irvin stuff. And he tries to hit a fireman's carry. And I still don't see how it went, but it ends up being a scramble. Irvin's in deep on Sanger on TV. And there goes, next thing I know, Mark's coming around and I'm screaming, no, don't do that. And I come around, he comes around, he's got the hammer lock, he's got the arm behind him. He comes around, circles ahead, flips the guy over and just decks him in the finals. I'm like, and I saw that finish and I'm like, no, yes.
I knew what we were doing.
Yeah, it's good coaching there.
Yeah.
No, that was crazy. And then it gets better. This was before the tornado. I'm back here at AP and I come in early August for a coaches meeting with Coach Thomas, and we're all coming in. And we walk into his coach's room and there sits a guy, and Coach Thomas says, yeah, I'd like you to meet a new math teacher, Michael Irvin. I'm like, and it didn't click right away. I'm like, Michael Irvin. And then it hit me. I'm like, is this the Michael Irvin? And he says, yes, Benning, shut up. Sanger pinned me. I'm like, oh, okay, done.
You're going to fit
I
in
got to coach
here.
with him. What a great guy he is too. I can tell you why they were both All-American linebackers. Holy buckets. They had the mindset for it. They were going to destroy something. But yeah, so it did get carried on to the next level there.
Is Irvin still at AP or is he elsewhere?
No, he actually got his administrative degree. He married a gal from Wesley.
Okay.
Her dad might have been part owner in the lumber yard.
I couldn't tell you if that would be.
Yeah, there's like three of them. But anyway, he married her and they were living in Parkersburg for a while. He was here for the tornado, got his administrative degree, went back to Bedford and became a principal. And I think he's now the superintendent of Bedford.
Oh, wow.
So he's down in your neck of the woods, a little farther south than you.
Yep,
There's not much south of you, but Bedford is.
It's a little ways, but it used to be in our conference before we
Yeah.
shifted up to the West Central Conference.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's breeze through a few of these seasons here. 2001 was my freshman year. We're still in 2A, 7-2, missed the playoffs with Ryan Johnson, Josh Eisman, those guys. Wrestling, your only seniors that year were Rolly Zamago and Eli Moe. Thing about Eli, he was not eligible to play football or wrestle that year because of moving in and the eligibility rules. That kid still came to every practice. I remember during
never missed. He loved it.
Yep. And then I came to one of your practices because we had 6 a.m. freshman basketball practice with Fink. Yep. And I was like, I want to drop a few pounds, get a little quicker, get in better shape. So I'm like, maybe Benny will let me come to wrestling a few days just to quickly lose that weight. And you're like, sure. And I think the smile on your face was like, I hope he gets a little rude awakening. And I didn't even do the wrestling part. It was more just the conditioning. And I was like, I am exhausted just from the conditioning part, let alone the working on the moves and scrimmaging, wrestling each other. I was like, yep, this wrestling thing would not be for me. I was a basketball player through and through. So
Hey, on that note, don't kid yourself, Dan, and all the listeners or who's ever watching or whatever we do here. Um, Dan talks down about his ability and his whatever the things that he did. Dan was a good football player, and don't let him kid you about any of that. Don't let him downplay it. And he darn good football player, and it made it even better that he cared. Those kids are tough to beat. Those are the guys you want on your team, and that's why Dan's a great guy today. That's why he's a great father. That's why he was doing stuff today. He cares that much, and it's just who he is. So, good job, Dan. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. 2002, we made it to the Dome for the first time in a couple years. It was in the quarters against Dyke New Hartford. We lost that game about 100 different ways. Crazy thing at the end with that crossing pattern pass I've talked about in other episodes, or tipped off that guy's fingertips, went right to the other guy. They got like a yard more than they needed, end up scoring and beating us 29-21. That one hurt.
That one hurt bad.
Coach Sanger got mic'd up for that game.
Oh, he did? I didn't know that.
They were doing some thing where they mic'd up the coaches, him and Tom Wilson. And we found that VHS tape in Coach's vault in the office. And we got to watch that entire game, listening to what he said the entire game. And let's just say on those last couple weird plays of the game, there were some things said that we can't repeat on here.
Right.
That was just nuts.
Right. And I remember that.
Oh, man.
I remember that the play you're talking about, because Darren Kruger was a D tackle for us. I remember it was about midfield, and it was third down and something, and we ran either angle two or angle. It ended up being a Chuckles cross, where the tackle crashed the B gap and the linebacker went the C gap, and Kruger broke through as a D tackle and sacked the quarterback late in the game. So now it was third and whatever, and we got him now 4th and long. Oh yeah, we're feeling good. We're feeling good. We got it. And I remember they came out. Correct me if I'm wrong. In my mind, they came out in double slot, and their 2 outside guys were on the sideline. So they were not. They were just going to either sit or go deep. But their 2 slot guys ran skinny posts. And in my mind, I don't remember who the free safety was. Was that Travis Johnson?
Might have been, yeah. He was.
Or Gabe Mitchell. I forget. No, Gabe was.
Gabe Rounds, maybe. Was he back there? Justin Plum?
Gosh, I forget. Anyway, we were in our defense, and the pass was thrown. And in my mind, the ball is coming into his hands, the receiver's hands. And in my mind, the free safety pops him a good one. And the ball goes off of his fingertips, and the other guy running the skiddy post ran right under it and caught the ball in midair in full stride. Never missed a beat. Am I right?
Yep, and they barely got the first down too.
That's the first down. Yes.
Yep, and then they scored. We tried a halfback pass. They picked it off for a touchdown.
Yeah, it was kind of scrambling mode there at the end.
Yeah, Gabe Mitchell threw like an 84-yarder to Lance Hill to make it respectable.
Yeah, Lance, yeah. And Eng was in there too, yes.
Yep. The thing that I remember the most, because I was a sophomore and so was he, Justin Johnson, you guys put him in on defense. Really the first time that whole season he had played like serious varsity minutes. We'd gotten in a little bit on kind of end of the game time, but that was the big spark we needed in the third quarter, among other things. But
again, great coaching there.
I'm like, man, one of my classmates is in a game at the Dome that started at like 9:30 at night or whatever it was.
Yes. Yeah, great coaching there too, wasn't it? Hey, let's keep one of the spark plugs on the sideline, as we find out.
Well, we were pretty loaded that year. I mean, that was an athletic team.
Pritchard, Brower, Mitchell, Gabe Mitchell. I talked to Pollock's brother coaches at Dowling, and I talked to him. I said, hey, there's a Mitchell kid. He played for me. His dad played for me.
Yeah, he's a good player too down there.
Yeah, and Rounds and Brower was in there.
Travis Johnson.
Justin that was a fun year too, because that whole crew got it. That was another one of those crew that I thought we had something special. The chemistry was there, and I was crushed after that game. But they had that chemistry going on. There was whatever, but there was something about they liked to play football. And early in the year, first game of the year, Travis Johnson was playing corner, and we played Forest City at Forest City, and that they had a new coach or whatever, and the Forest City quarterback would always run over to the sideline, get the play, run back to the huddle.
Mhm.
And I remember a timeout or something, and I'm like, hey, Travis, come here. I said, it might have been pregame. I said, but whenever we can, don't cross the line of scrimmage. But any chance you can get, when you see that quarterback run over on your side of the field, go run over to the sideline with him. He said, you look that coach square in the eye and you shake your head like you got it. And then I said, you turn around and you run like you know what the play is and tell them, point at somebody. And Travis did it. And that was the best part of the whole deal right there. I was like, you can see the coach, he's watching, and the kids and the fans are like hollering at Travis. I'm like, you're not doing anything. But I remember that was a good time.
Yeah.
That was one of those things.
Yeah. Justin Michelson was another player I
Oh
really
yeah.
liked on that team.
Scrappy fella.
Small dude, put him at nose guard and just
Yep.
let him go to town.
Yep.
Josh
Perfect.
Eisman the year before, Brian
Yep.
Talak the year after. We had some good nose
Yep.
guards.
And Steve, the walking tape ball Eisman.
Yeah. That 02 season, though, we lose to Dyke. They go to play Pekin in the semis in the next round, beat them 14-7. Dyke passed for like 300 yards on us and only ran for like 50. In that semifinal game against Pekin, they ran for like 350 yards. And I was like, we would have ran for 500 on those guys.
Exactly. Heartbreak.
Yeah, and then I don't know if we would have beaten Akron that year. They were pretty amazing. I thought they were pretty good.
We were all right too, though.
Their quarterback, Mike Parkinson, was the head coach at Linville Sully, who we played in the semis a couple weeks ago.
Ooh. Yeah.
Yep, his dad was the coach. So, yep. Wrestling, Ryan Pritchard made it to state that year. Going back to football real quick, I think he blocked about 10 kicks that year in football. He wrestled Dan.
He had what we called the swivel hips. He could get the hips and swivel. Good kid.
Oh, he was fun to watch. He wrestled Dan Hammis from Sigourney at State. That kid was a stud football player at Wartburg.
I think he was All-American.
Yep. And then your last year at Britt would have been 2003 football season. We called ourselves later on kind of the cardiac kids that season. Snuck by Garner, killed Forest City, beat Southeast Webster by 1 when we stopped them on a 2-point conversion.
Oh, that's right.
We killed St. Ed's like 40-0, but then we go to, I think it was Lake Mills when we were 6-0, they were 0-6. And Justin Johnson and I talk about this one, how you were so mad at us, you couldn't even talk. You were just whisper yelling at us at halftime because they went 0-9, we go 9-0. Somehow we're down, I think 19-7 at halftime or into the third quarter. And you were, I mean, as red as your hat and your jacket is right now. And all you could do was whisper at us some words I, again, can't say on air.
No, I never said those things.
Yeah.
You heard what you heard. I never said them.
Yeah. And we come back and tie it. I don't know. We got the game tying touchdown probably in the last 3-4 minutes of the game. Then we score in overtime. We make an extra point, which was not real common for us. Lance was a good kicker. We just went for 2 a lot. And then they score. That Blake Henley, their big fullback, scored, and then they went for 2 and we stopped them. And I remember we all kind of jumped up and down to celebrate quick, but then it was kind of like, all right, we just got to get out of here. Like,
exactly. Let's get home. Yeah. I remember that. Yes. That was one of those, you can tell the kids, you got to be prepared. We're okay. They're and whatever. You guys don't understand. They don't like losing. They want to win too. And it's hard to get that message across to 16, 17-year-old boys that are trying to become men. But I think after, again, another saying, I think after that night, that was a little eye opening, and we better become men here,
Yeah. And then we go on and beat South Hamilton 14-3. We're down 3-0 with like 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. Justin Johnson returns an interception for a touchdown, gets a punt down to the 2, then has a pick six. Then Garrigan the next week, down 12-0 at half, come back and win in overtime 18-12. I just remember Sanger and Wadley, their head coach. I
Yep.
think there were some words exchanged in the paper leading up to that week. They thought they should have had our #1 ranking. And I remember after the game, I was standing on the sideline on that last play when Darren Carlson intercepted that pass in overtime. And Coach Sanger's feet were about at my eye level. If I remember, it just seemed like it anyway. I've never seen a
And
guy
I think he was 72 at the time, wasn't he?
No, not quite. No.
Oh,
And I think after the game, again, some real quick words got exchanged in the handshaking line, but that kind of got that rivalry going.
It did. I remember that was I remember the Lake Mills game. I don't want to, but I do. But I remember the Garrigan game as well. They had a big tight end. What was his name?
I don't remember the tight end, but the running back was Derek Tyndall.
Oh yeah, Tyndall. He was fast. He was one of them,
He was
like
big
a
and fast.
state track meet type fast.
Then Marceau was another good athlete they had. Capetious, they had one of them.
Yep. But I remember a couple things from that. The when Carlson picked that pass off in the end zone, and the crowd went crazy and whatever else. And I just remember he comes running over to me with, maybe I shouldn't say this. Can you hit pause or something? I don't know. It's again, statute of limitations is gone. They're going to owe him a football. So Darren comes over to me, says, "Coach, I kept the ball," and it had on it Garrigan, a personalized, burned in leather, Algona Garrigan or Bishop Garrigan or whatever it was. He said, "Here, hang on to this. I want to keep it." So I put it in the ball bag. So I kept it. And game was over. I put it in my locker in the coach's room.
Mm-hmm.
I kept it there until graduation. And I pull it out and I bring it up to Darren and I said, "Darren, remember this?" He's like, "Oh my God, I hope he still has it."
Cool.
That was a good one. And then after the game, we started on our west sideline and we work our way east and shake their hands. And I was right behind Coach, and the crowd's going crazy because the communities, again, as you said, we're exchanging words and via the paper and upset. And I just remember I was behind Sanger the whole way, and he turned around and faced the home stands, and we were on the other side of the field, and the crowd erupts again. Or maybe I just heard him, I don't know. But the crowd goes crazy again. And I remember Coach raising both his hands, pumping like this, and then he was high kneeing. He was running, he high kneed. I'm like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Are you all right?" He's like, "Yeah, gotta do that every now and then."
I don't remember that. I must have been
yeah, no, you guys were all celebrating. You're ahead of it. Yeah, no, that was
running off. Yeah, that game was nuts. But then we beat Manson pretty handily, North Iowa handily, and then we got matched up with Eldora, New Providence again. And
wait, hang on that North Iowa game.
Yeah,
that 1986 game was really cold.
Mm-hmm.
I was playing, so I just hear about it. But that North Iowa game, that was still in the 50-point rule, and they didn't have locker rooms. We played up there.
And that was 2002. That was the year before. Yeah, we beat them 54-0.
Yeah.
I have some bad memories of that game because that was, my parents are from Buffalo. My grandparents are from Buffalo. My parents brought Jake Moore with to come, ride with them to watch the game. They go over to my grandma and grandpa's house. My grandpa overfed Jake so bad he was on the floor in the fetal position. Couldn't stand
Just what
up.
Grandparents should do.
Yep. But Boozman comes up to me. We're up 48-0 at halftime. And he comes up to me, he goes, "Crawl, you're in your hometown or whatever. We're going to get you in here quick." I'm like, "Oh, great." And then a minute into the third quarter, Justin Johnson runs a 45-yard touchdown in, game over, 54-0.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was, but yeah, it was over quick.
But it was cold, like ridiculously cold that game. Yeah.
I just remember I had my Russian hat on. I
Yep.
had all these layers of clothes on, and I remember going to the bus for halftime. And I remember coach saying, hey fellas, we've got this game. We just need to finish it the right way. He said, we got a choice to make. We can either finish the game and get the kids on the field that deserve to be on the field, that have been to practice every day, that deserve varsity playing time, and do that. He said, or we can just kick their ass and go home. And I just remember the bus going, yeah, the bus erupted and got off the bus, ran off and kicked their ass.
Yeah. And we were trying to get players like me in the game as a sophomore, but it just didn't
Right.
happen. It was like the next play I was going in, and I gave Justin crap for years after that. Like, really?
Way to go, JJ.
Got to score a touchdown. Yeah. Yeah. Then we go to Eldora for the first round of the playoffs, and we knew that game was not probably going to go. I mean, they were phenomenally good. Aaron Rasmussen was hurt. He played, but was, half of what he could have been. Mitch Horseman was hurt. And even with those two at full strength, I don't know. I think we're still outmanned by those guys. I always tell people I tackled Dustin Baum, their stud running back, but it was more that he ran me over and I just grabbed enough jersey to take him down. So
Yeah,
got the
he was
tackle, but they were
he
good.
lives in Wellsburg now too. I see
Oh,
him
does
every
he?
now and then. Yeah.
Nice.
Now the backstory to that, you neglect to tell them your junior year when first round of playoffs, they came up to Britt that year.
So that was my sophomore year. Yep, sophomore.
That was your sophomore. Yeah, gosh dang it. But yeah, and I remember it was a close game, and it was that same crew. See, when you get my age, and a lot of these things run together.
Yeah, yeah.
But so that year we're playing up in Britt and going to halftime. It's a close game, and that's no big deal. We talk about it. Let's go out. Let's play our second half football, and we try to go out the door, get the kids out, and the line was going nowhere. I'm like, get going, from the back by the showers.
Yeah.
And finally we wiggle out one at a time, and there stands the whole Eldora team right beside the door. Rah, 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 rah. I'm like, oh, that's not going to go well with the guys. And I remember Sanger said something about on the field or something about, we're not going to take that, are we? And that's about all it was. And then we rolled them. But that year you're talking about down in Eldora, woo, they were not the same team. They were mad again, same situation. They were 2 district champions. They had to come to Britt. And then the next year, the roles were reversed, 2 district champions, and we went down there.
Yeah.
And yeah, we got pummeled 33-0. You couldn't do anything. We couldn't stop them, couldn't move them, couldn't do it. And they beat us 33-0. And I think they would have put 133 on us if we didn't fight back.
Yep. And that was another cold night. I remember, holy cow, it was brutally cold out. And yeah, as a 16, 17-year-old kid, you get to a point where you're like, I don't want this to get out of hand, but also just want it to kind of be over at the same time. But
I remember on that game getting pummeled, and Randy Waltman was playing, and he comes running off the field on defense. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, look.
Yeah, I remember that.
Take his mouthpiece out. I'm like, what's wrong? And he goes, her lip. I'm like, well, what's wrong? And his lip was rolled over his front teeth and stuck to his teeth. And he had a trainer there. In one of the first years, he had a trainer, and she was over there trying to lift it up nicely. And he's screaming, ah! And finally, he had enough, and he goes, get out of the way. And he screams, ah! And he pulls his lip off of his teeth. And I go, geez, let me take a look at that. And he folds it over. And I think the only thing holding his lip on was the epidermis layer of his skin. I'm like, well, Waltman, you can suck on some ice. I don't know if you want to go back in or not, but or if you can, but just suck on some ice to stop the bleeding. He sucked on some ice, went back in the game. Trainer, I don't even know if the trainer let him or knew he went out there. But yeah, that was a tough night. God, that was your junior year?
That was my junior year, yep. Because then you left after that year.
Yep.
Perkins came back. We dropped to
Yep.
Class A, and we went 7-2 and missed the playoffs. And we lost a lot of good players. We didn't have as much depth. Had a good freshman class that ended up going to the Dome a few times, but ran into Northwood and Riceville. They were pretty darn good that year, and we
Yeah,
had pretty
Northwood
high
had a good year.
expectations that maybe weren't as realistic as they should have been. But yeah, so your last year of wrestling, Dan Finch made it to state but did not place, and then after that school year, 2003 2004, you left to go back kind of home.
Yep.
What led you to go back home?
Oh, again, my mom and dad called, said they're going to sell the acreage and they're going to keep the farm and the tractors and the bins and everything, but they're just going to sell the house. And I asked the wife, they said, well, wait a minute, Melissa's from Parkersburg. Might work out well if see if she wants to go back. And at the time, I was dabbling with farming. I would drive back on the weekends and work all day, Saturday, Sunday. During football season, and then get back and try to do it. And it was just, I was getting into farming a little bit, helping dad. And then I started renting a couple acres from him. And it just worked out that, the kids got to be close to their grandparents on Sunday afternoon and not have to worry about travel. So it was really kind of based on, getting the kids close to the grandparents was probably the leading factor. The wife didn't have to fight for a new job. She could transfer within the AEA and got that taken care of. So we didn't have to take a hit financially. I worked a little bit. I didn't have a teaching job right away. I worked for about 3 months out at the Target Distribution Center, weekend nights, and then sub during the week. And a long-term, the history teacher got in a car accident on Thanksgiving that fall, snowstorm, got in an accident on the New Hartford curve there, and they needed a long-term sub. So, and he was old enough to retire after that. So I filled in for long-term sub. He retired and I stepped in.
How hard was it though to leave West Hancock at that point?
Oh, that was one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to make or even suggest to my wife. Just we were making connections, we're putting roots down, love the people, love the communities, love the proximity, loved everything about it. You got good people, you got friends that your kids are friends with, and you got more people coming in that and then you're building your network web, and your friendships are growing deeper and your roots are growing deeper. That was extremely difficult, and it's, I mean, I'm glad we moved back and the way things worked out, but man, that was tough. That was real tough because I really liked it up there. I still love it up there. I still talk with the guys as much as I can, but that was extreme. It was extremely difficult to say, hey, we're leaving.
Yeah. Did Coach Sanger kind of know it was coming? Did you talk to him about like, hey, we're thinking about doing this, or was it one of those like, hey, this is what's happening? How did he
I
sure
remember talking to him about it and in classic Sanger fashion. Well, you gotta, he says, you gotta do what you gotta do. He said, I kind of wish my grandkids were closer to me. And he was always awesome at I always wanted an answer out of the guy. And that was probably about the only answer I ever got out of him, because he was notorious. And I don't know if he did it with everybody or just me to piss me off or what, or get me to grow up. I don't know, but he would never answer my question. He would always answer my question with a question.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, I said, what do you think? I said, I got a chance. We really like it here. I got a chance to go back and farm a little bit with my dad, and maybe, someday take over and buy him out and this and that, and kind of laid it all out there. And then I remember one of his responses was, well, have you really thought about this? I'm like, come on, Coach, I just told you everything I thought about. I'm like, did you not? And did you not hear me? Because he was hard of hearing too. Did you not hear me?
Yeah, trust me, I know he was hard of hearing because
And then on that note, every time before a football game, I would have to tell the officials, I'm like, he can't hear worth a hoot. I said, so if you need to tell him something, you need to be face to face and you can't just be talking over your shoulder. I said, he needs to, and if you need me to tell him, I'll tell him. But no, he was real good about it. And Linda was the same. Oh crap, what did I do?
no, you're good.
Oh, I did something there. But Linda was good about it, and everybody's very supportive. You know, the friends we made, you know, our neighbors, the Finches have moved to town. Chuck and Lois Conway, our neighbors to the north there, they were like, goodness gracious, yeah, you know, there were several saying, yeah, you got to take this chance. You got to, you know, when's the last time, you know, your dad's at the time was 68, maybe 65, 68, had a couple of heart surgeries and whatnot. And some of them were like, yeah, you need to go. We're going to miss you. But, you know, they were very supportive of pushing us out.
Yeah.
Maybe they wanted us to go. I don't know. But
I
no,
know
they
it's
were,
the best thing for your family. So
well,
that's
you know, and that was extremely tough. You know, Zach was the oldest and he had, um, as many friends as anybody. And Molly, the youngest, she was only a year or two old. And, you know, she always gets mad when we go back there or see somebody when we run across from Britt and oh, this is so-and-so from, you know, they remember you from Britt. And Molly just shakes her head. Dad, we left when I was 2. What do you think I remember? I'm like, oh yeah, I get it.
yeah. Yeah. So what did Coach Sanger mean to you overall, and with his passing in 2020, how was it processing all that with kind of one of your first mentors in coaching?
You know, you look at things and it's a lot like he wanted the kids to grow into. My vision of him seeing into kids, you know, you're going to have to be a man someday. You're going to have to make some choices someday. But let's be civil about it. You know, just being a quality. There was some he mentioned some soul searching at times. He was just real, you know, and just you know when it's spring football meetings. If fellas, he'd get the guys in the room, fellas. If you want to be a good football team, he put the responsibility on you guys, you know. And he says this is a young man's thing. He says I cannot be in the weight room all summer. He says I can't be there twice a day, 3 times a day for 6 hours. He says I got a farm to run. I got things to do. I just, you know, there's so many things that I learned from him, you know, just about I say growing up. And hell, I was like you. I was 35, 38, something, I don't even know. But those same messages were hitting home. You know, I like you. I was the assistant coach. He'd talk 15 minutes at the pep rally after old Doc Hiscox had come in with Dr. Spirit. And then Sanger would come in and he would talk and he'd just be real. Mm-hmm. And it was calming. You know what I mean? And just it's weird. It's hard to say, but yeah. And I miss that. I learned a lot from him. Just, you know, thinking about, you know, I would take, if we'd lose the game, you know, we gave up 29 points or whatever to Dyke, and I was all shook up. And I remember that bus ride home, I couldn't shake it. And he just sat there. He's not happy either, but he sat in the other seat. And I said, Coach, how can you just sit there and take this? That was our game. We had that. All we had to do, and it was this, it was that. And he looks over at me and he said, in classic Sanger fashion, he didn't answer my question. He said, how would you like to be in a state final game leading 21-7 or 21-7 at half and lose 22-21?
1993 Mount Vernon. Yep. We're up 21-0 in that game.
Is that what it was? I couldn't remember.
Yep.
And lose 22-21. I'm like, Oh, I guess I put that in perspective. Again, we'll put it in perspective. Oh, okay. Maybe this isn't so bad.
Yeah. And what always got me with him was on game, the end of the season after a playoff loss, he always talked about how he felt for the seniors. Like, he knew there was another game coming that next year for him, but for that senior class, he was always so concerned about that group of kids that, put so much into the program and we're never going to get that chance again. So I always appreciated how loyal he was to his
Oh,
seniors.
absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing I think about that too, um, I never once, how many years you coach, have you been coaching or whatever? And he talks about all these players or whatever, and he'll pull somebody out or somebody will come up and say from the 76 squad or whatever, do you remember so-and-so? And Sanger never said anything. Oh boy, he was, you say, oh, he's a good kid, whatever, good football player. By God, he meant it.
Mm-hmm.
He did not have a bad football player any year that he coached. He had guys that were good football players. Some were a little better than others, but everybody, again, it's just kind of he was a good football player. I mean, you pick your all-state kid, he's a good football player.
Yeah.
You pick the kid that came out, couldn't tie his shoestring. He was a good football player.
Yeah. He knew how to make you feel important and good and valued and yeah, just all around.
And then his passing, God, we went to a couple of NCAA tournaments, wrestling tournaments. And one year is Philadelphia, another year was St. Louis. I don't know if you've ever been to St. Louis Cardinals game.
Mm-mm.
Well, their left field is street level. You can look in over the ballpark there and some bleachers. But then there's the street, and then across the street is a building like a pavilion. And Coach Sanger, he didn't leave the farm very much growing up, and he was pretty comfortable in Britt and Kanawha areas, and he knew his way around. But we're sitting there, and it's just packed. And we're on this patio across the street, overlooking the stadium. And my back's against the pavilion, and his back is against the stadium. And I can't remember the name of the place. So why do they call this the Cardinal Pavilion? Coach, turn around. Oh, well, why didn't they just say that? I'm like, they kind of did.
Yeah. It's kind of implied at that point.
Yeah. His passing, it hurt. Maybe it wasn't so much the passing, maybe it was because I got to sit with him in those in this box in the final game. When I was right beside him, and got to talk. Him and Kevin both, I was right there, and just he was so happy, and he was always everything he did was about the football team. I mean, every decision he ever made was about a football team, and he was so darn happy. But I would say maybe the thing that was hard for me was and I only knew him since 1998. But to see it to wither away like that, just to see that physical specimen, big sausage finger coming at you, and not just to see what he once was and how much he's hurting, how much he was hurting for the kids because he wanted to be on the sideline, he wanted to be in the locker room, and it hurt him, but it hurt me knowing that he wanted to be there. And to me, that was the hard part, knowing he wanted to be in the mix of things. And it's just a little heartbreaking when that happens. But, the communities rallied around it. You're doing great things, Dan, with the Sanger Foundation. And it's just, I'm glad to see it carrying it on. And it's all the positive things. I went to the funeral and just as to be a good human, right?
Yep.
Kind of all the way around. I have this at my desk. I don't know if you can see it. It says the pamphlet from his funeral that day.
Yeah.
And I see pictures, I see the family. I mean, I open it up and it's just kind of keeps me humble. It kind of keeps me real, and it kind of keeps me, with kids in the classroom. It's,
Mhm.
and again, I got it posted up right here to take the sticker out of it. But I look at it every day and I see that cheesy grin and I see that big sausage finger pointing at me every now and then. But no, that was the hard part for me. You know, I tell kids in school too, I'm like, I can handle pain, I can handle agony, I can handle heartbreak. But when I see somebody else crying, when I see somebody else hurting, that's what gets me. You
Mhm.
know, I go to a funeral and it's anybody else's funeral and I may not know the person, but I can see the wife, I can see the kids crying. That sticks me in the heart. And
Yeah.
and that's what I remember. I'm like, I can't keep this together.
Yeah.
It was tough.
And I wasn't able to go to the funeral, but the night before I went to the visitation, and it was like 4-ish hour wait in line to get to the family. And Mrs. Sanger, I get up to her, I am so sorry that you waited. So I'm like, stop worrying about other people waiting. And then I was making the
Classic.
making the record book at that time, the Bob Sanger record book, and she goes, "We want to compensate," and blah blah. I'm like, again, why are you worrying about this right now? Or like, it's just that's just the type people. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Well,
this is an honor to wait 4.5 hours to get to
yeah,
you.
it really, yeah. Again, you know, and that's the community can complement the communities. I mean, because that's the communities you live in.
Yeah,
That's just what it is. And that all goes together, seeing the big picture like that.
yeah. And to tie everything into your current situation, in 2006, Montezuma versus AP, first round of the playoffs up in Monty. I ride with Jeff and Kevin Sanger. We're on the coaching staff at Central to go scout a couple kids from Montezuma, Lee Schroeder and a couple others. And I knew you were going to be there. And so after the game, I was like, I'm going to go find Benny. And after the game, you guys got beat 35-0 to
Pummeled.
Montezuma. They went to the finals that year. I go find you, and I'm a little nervous. Like, I know Benning doesn't like to lose. I hope he doesn't, just whatever. And excited to see me. And have you ever met Coach Thomas before? And I'm like, no, I haven't. He goes, let's go meet him. I'm like, no. Like, I was honored that you wanted me to go meet him because I knew of him. I'm like, he just got beat 35-0. I'm thinking like Coach Sanger after a loss sometimes is, doesn't want to talk. And Ed talked to me for like 20 minutes that night. I don't know if you remember that at all, but he stood there and asked me about school, asked me about football, about life, about my family. He knew people up from Buffalo Center where my
Oh, yeah.
parents live. And I was like, this guy just got destroyed in a playoff game, and he had that time of day for me. So at I-35, I read alouds are a big thing in education where you read out loud to the kids. I'm teaching 8th grade reading. I'm like, what can I read aloud to 8th graders? And so I picked The Sacred Acre because I thought that would be a lot of good life lessons in there. And that was at the same time Coach Sanger was sick. And we, unfortunately kind of knew it wasn't going to end well. And man, when I got to that part about Coach Thomas at the end there, um, and then with correlating everything with Coach Sanger, uh, I saw a lot of positive changes in those kids in my classroom. Of they were kind of thinking outside of just their own little world.
Yeah. Yes. Not
Middle
yes.
school life of woe is me, about like this is some real life stuff, and it was a challenge to get through reading that book. And I only met the guy once for 20 minutes, and odds are he forgot about me as soon as he got done talking to me. And the day Coach Sanger passed away, I got to school that morning, and he had passed at like 2 in the morning, and it was 7:30. I got into my classroom, get open my computer, and it's just all over Facebook what happened. And my first group of kids came in, and the my face must have said it all. And those kids sat down and they started, all right, guys, let's get to work. They knew what they needed to work on that day, and they just let me sit there. And that was kind of I was like, I was, pretty proud of my kids for, having that
Picking up on
empathy
that.
and picking up on that. And there were some AP and West Hancock fans born out of that
Well,
school
that's good.
year.
That's
And
good.
yeah, so to transition with all that said, you went from Bob Sanger to Ed Thomas. That's
I was 5 years with Ed Thomas and then came back. Yeah. So I'm, yeah, 5 years in college, because I was on the 6-year plan to get through the Harvard of the Midwest. The Harvard of the Midwest is extremely difficult to get into and even harder to graduate from, but I did it. But 5 years with Ed, and then 6 years with Coach Sanger, and then I get to come back. Yeah, I am extremely blessed, just in the coaching circle. That's, you're looking at two top-notch people, and I got to work with, not for, I got to work with two fantastic people. And I can't say enough about either one of them. It was just a great experience.
Yeah. What the tornado, real quick here. We're gonna wrap this up here in a little bit, but you're sitting in AP high school right now.
Yeah, brand new one, 09, 10, something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, where you were started, in '04, not the same building you're sitting in right now because of that tornado. What was that like? I mean, a lot of people read the book, a lot of people watched the YouTube videos of things, but you experienced that firsthand. What was that like?
It was absolutely mind blowing. My college roommate called me and when it happened, and he said, "Geez, I seen it on TV. Is it that bad?" I said, "It's worse." Because I said, "TV, you just get to see this." I said, "You stand right here and you do a 360, the whole thing looks like that."
Mhm.
Thank goodness we only lost 6 lives out of that. It hit New Hartford as well. But it was devastating. It was, the kind of the running joke after it got going. I mean, it just all blew over, and in the whatever cleanup organization, the federal government said, "Put your stuff by the curb, they'll come by and pick it up." And kind of the running joke was, "Well, everything that's in my yard isn't mine."
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it was flattened. It was devastating. Um, it was, I mean, there's crazy stories, and I saw this firsthand, and I would never believe it. There was a house that got just gone down to the floorboards, linoleum picked off the floor, all the plastic, the whatever floorboard stuff down to the floorboards. And the only thing left on that house was a kitchen table. And I'll get this, on that kitchen table was a bag of Oreos. Don't ask me how. I mean, there's all sorts of stories like that. A guy lost his house and the picture frames are still, lost his roof and the picture frames are still sitting on the mantles.
The one about the wedding invitations or something, wasn't there? Someone was working on wedding invitations. They ran down when the storm hit and they came back and everything was gone except for pretty much all the invitations, or I just remember in the book, something like that.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, those are not exaggerations. But it was complete. I mean, it was, I'm telling you, everybody says it looks like a bomb went off, and it did. It did. There was nothing left. The trees were stripped naked. There was just big sticks sticking up. So all of the hard part was the street signs are gone. And shit, I never paid attention to street signs. I don't
Mhm.
even, even in Britt or Kanawha, you just go to the park and you turn left, or you go to the
Yep.
bank and you turn right, or
The old
whatever.
Johnson house. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. But there was none of that. And somebody came to town to help out, and where's this street? I don't know. Who are you looking for?
Yeah.
It should be in this area over here.
2 houses down from where that
Yeah.
house used to be.
But I'll tell you what, the outpouring of caringness from people to come in and give of themselves to pick up and clean up and do whatever they did. I had football teams crawling on their hands and knees across the football field, picking up nails and debris. That's true. Because it was Coach Wilson.
Yep. Tom.
All of those stories about people coming, it was incredible. You got people from all over the Midwest. You got people from all over the country that gave up their own time to go help people they didn't know. And personally, I remember going home at the end of the night. I mean, it was just nonstop. You wake up, you go into town, and just like I would come home and I would just go, man, I'm so tired. I shoveled stuff, I picked stuff up. I mean, day after day after day. I remember going home and I remember sitting down in my recliner, just leaning back, going, man, I'm tired. And then it hit me. I got to go back tomorrow because my friends, the community has nothing. I said, I got to go back. Here I am feeling good, like, oh, good day. So no. And that was just the driving force. But it was incredible, just the outpouring of communities across. I mean, it's the true Midwestern spirit. Hey, let's got knocked down. Let's get up and let's get going.
Yeah.
And it
And
was incredible.
Coach Thomas was a big part of that. He was the figurehead of that community, the coach, the Bob Sanger of AP, whatever. And he, had moments. He lost everything. He could have been pretty down on things, and he was the guy that said, "All right, if we got to do this," and
Yeah,
everyone looked up to him. And talking to some people are like, "Man, how could they, put that football field and getting that first game played as a priority with everything going on?" I'm like, makes total sense to me as a sports guy. Like, that's a rallying point of something to look forward to.
exactly.
If you're shoveling stuff every day and you don't feel like there's an end game here, like, you're going to lose that steam and just sit on the recliner the next day.
Yep.
There's something big to look forward to.
And it
It's just
was,
a football
you
game, but
know,
still.
yeah, that's just it. It was just a football game. But, and Sanger got the same idea. I mean, there's a bigger picture.
Mhm.
There's a bigger picture, and Coach Sanger saw that. Oh, there's always something bigger than the football game. There's always something bigger than what's happening here. This is for a reason, and I think that's just his personality. I mean, he didn't know any different. He lived at the school. He lived at home. His hobbies were golf and mowing the football field.
Yeah.
That's it. And then he played cribbage a little bit too. But I mean, he didn't do anything. But for him to have the bigger picture, the wherewithal about himself, say, hey, a lot of his players, he lost his house, but his teammate, his the kid that he coached the last 10 years, I mean, it wasn't just him. He's like, hey, we got to do this together. Let's go do it. That's just who he is. Let's go do it. And he was a lot more high strung than Coach Sanger. Hey, let's just do it. Let's go. Gotta go. Gotta go. Gotta go.
Yeah.
But no, it was just, and it became a rally. Yeah, like you said, it became a rally point. It got to have something to do. Let's go. Let's can't sit here. We got to go.
Yeah. And then the tornado and the rebuild in that first game, that was like movie worthy at that point.
Yeah.
And fast forward a year, I am at my parents' country club that they managed, the barn up in Buffalo Center. And Don Anderson, he was the Buffalo Center coach for a while. Then he was
Mhm.
at Battle Creek, Ida Grove. He
Iowa
just
Falls
recently
most
at Iowa
recently.
Falls. Um, Don's a big, kind of gruff guy. And I walk into my parents' country club and he is at a table sobbing. And I'm like, that's not normal at all. And the news was on and it broke about what happened to Coach Thomas that next year, with his passing, being murdered. Um, talk about that, like how I can't even imagine. I had to tell my kids when I was reading that book to them, I had to keep telling them, guys, this is real life. Like, that whole
Yeah.
story, I mean, in our world anymore of just content, kids sometimes struggle with real versus fake type stuff. And it was like, this sounds like a crazy
Yep.
book someone thought of to make, and it's real life and it happened 2 hours from here and it was people I know were affected by it. How do you even begin?
It's very humbling, and I just remember being upset. And I mean, it's a bad situation all the way around. Any way you look at it, it's a bad situation. And then I again, maybe this is my age showing a little bit, but I felt angry, that the sanctuary of a small town where you can leave your doors unlocked, where the school doors might not be locked, but everybody knows the kids go in and play basketball or they go work out or whatever. Just the sanctity of a small town was violated. And I'm like, gosh, this happens in big cities. This doesn't happen in small town Iowa.
Mhm.
Um, and it was tough. And I got to compliment, the Thomas family, because they could have been real bitter. Um, the fact that they handled it with such grace, and I don't want to say humility. I guess I don't have the words. You're the English guy. Help me out here. Grace and not humility, but
Just
empathy.
their character just came out,
Oh, huge. Again, both sides, the Becker family, Coach Thomas coached his dad.
Mhm.
He coached his son. He coached his little brother, and his older brother. So it's a tangled up mess, and just to keep it together like that, and to know that they're cared for and they're loved,
Mhm.
and again, that could have turned the town inside out. Pick a side, whatever, and it really didn't. It brought everybody together is in a different fashion, and I don't know why it always takes a tragedy. Why can't we live this way all the time? You look at 9/11. Look, after 9/11, the United States was never tighter. After the
Yep.
tornado, the town was never tighter. And after Ed Thomas got shot, it was, we came together. Why did it take that? Why can't we just do that? Be that way all the time?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I just remember watching the ESPYs when the family got that award, and who did they bring with? They brought the Becker family with.
Yeah.
When they showed that video and Brett Favre, was doing the presenting or whatever, and I can't remember which athlete it was in the crowd, but they showed one of the as a football player, and when the video got done and everyone started clapping for the family to come up, a couple of the athletes in the crowd just went, "Wow!" Like you could just see what they were just like unbelievable, like how to respond the way they did is just mind blowing.
And yeah, that's the people they are. That's not fake. That wasn't put up. I mean, that's real. That's who they are. That's who they'll be tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. And I met Jan in 2012. She was speaking up in Buffalo Center at the Heritage Center, a nice new building they put together up there in Buffalo. And I was up there because my grandma was about ready to pass, and I had been with her all day, and my mom, and was like, I know Jan Thomas is going to be there. I want to go listen in on this. And there was 100+ people there, and I waited around, and I went to talk to her, and I was like, do you know a man named Brian Benning? And she went, Benning, who doesn't know Brian Benning? And again, just like Ed did at that Montezuma game, she talked to me for 10 minutes, and she goes, if we had a couple hours, I'd tell you some really good stories, but and just to go and be so vulnerable and tell their story, and
Yeah.
uh, just it was just crazy. And uh, she asked about me, and I said, with my grandma, what was going on. I was pretty close with her, and said she'd pray for me, and she told me, about Ed, sitting with Ed, and their faith is a pretty big part of their life, and their whole life, and about how everything Ed did, it was worth it, and yeah, it stinks that he's gone, and but man, they were just the big picture that they always had in mind, just is
Yes.
my mind. So
That's incredible. Again, those people have that great vision. I have a tough time getting out of my classroom on some days.
yeah,
But for those guys to have that big a vision, as you said, just to be able to bring it all together.
yeah, it's crazy. All right, well, I don't think there's any better way to wrap it up than talking about the man that Ed Thomas was. So I think this is a good stopping point. And holy cow, it's 9:20 and past my bedtime. So
Yeah, I know. I'm lucky I'm still awake.
crazy. Uh, Next up on the podcast, I have Steve Perkins, and then you mentioned him earlier, Dr. Don Hiscox, and then I'm wrapping up the year with 5 retired elementary teachers from the old Britt Elementary, West Hancock Elementary also. I want to thank you again for coming on. This was a lot of fun. I always enjoy all these podcasts, but especially the ones where it's you were my teacher, you were my coach, and uh, I'm gonna quiz you here real quick. Do you know my first name? Because you called everyone by their last names for all those years.
Yes, it's Dan, but Dano is the first thing that I think
There
of.
we go. Yeah, I was joking. I'm like, I wonder if he's gonna call anyone by their first names tonight, or it's gonna be all last names. So
It was tough. I had to think about it, but yeah, I can.
yeah. Yeah. So, any last minute things we forgot or didn't get to mention earlier? Any shout outs or the thing you want?
I just want to make sure, thank your sponsors, you know, what they're standing behind you, what you're doing is great. I love it. I've heard several of them. I haven't heard them all, but I like listening to them. And I want to say, I want to thank the communities of Britt and Kanawha for accepting my family when we were there and being gracious enough to, you know, say goodbye. I miss them. I miss all you guys up there. I don't talk to you guys near enough and be involved enough, but Britt and Kanawha, great place to be. I hope nothing but the best for everybody up there.
Awesome. All right. Well, Coach, I appreciate it, and go Eagles and go AP.
That's right. Thanks, Dan.
Bet. Thanks.